Alrighty, welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by Mr. John Harris, of course. And today we are making our Week 10 picks against the spread. And before we dive into that, just real quick, as per usual, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or listening to us via the podcast mediums, via Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and such. Also, we do have our socials at Shut Up and Ball Pod, at Shut Up and Ball. At Shut Up and Ball Pod is Instagram, and at Shut Up and Ball is our TikTok and Twitter. And we have a Facebook page as well, which is just Shut Up and Ball and our logo. But anyhow, as I mentioned, we are here to make our Week 10 picks against the spread, John and myself. Last week, unfortunately, we did have 5 differences. Unfortunately for John, didn't really go his way. So I went 8-5 last week. John went 5-8. So I get back above 500. I probably should have. Let's see. So before that, technically I'm 8 games ahead going into this week. But obviously, like I mentioned, we're week 9. We're at the halfway point, and we'll be doing playoffs. So there'll be plenty of time for John to make ground. You've done that before anyway. So so let's dive straight into the picks. We don't have a London game this week, but we have a game in Germany. So another early Sunday game. So make sure to check your fancy stuff and all that. And it's between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are favored by 2.5. This is technically at Seattle. Seattle's the quote-unquote home team. This is, they're not home in Germany. John, who are you rolling with here? You rolling with Geno and the gang, or you think Tom Brady and the Bucs can keep the ball rolling off that win last week?
I'm going to keep this one pretty short and simple. I'm rolling Seattle. They're on a hot streak, and they're playing well on both sides of the ball. Their defense has really impressed me the last couple weeks. And Tampa Bay is struggling. The fact that they're playing a Rams team that is also struggling and they barely managed to squeak it out against a really hot Seattle team who's just kind of got everything figured out right now. Like, there's no one part of their game that I'm like, they're not doing too well. Like, the run game's going well. Defense is thriving. Geno's having a great performance. I like what I'm seeing out of Seattle, so I'm going to keep riding that Seattle train until they prove me wrong, and it's just hard to pick Tampa right now.
I'm going Seattle. Their offense hasn't always, it's not a juggernaut per se, but it's been a functioning offense. They're very well balanced. Obviously Kenneth Walker's been really good for them, and we all know Geno's been really well. And I'm surprised that DK Metcalf has been able to play with the injury he sustained a couple weeks ago, but he's been able to play through it, and not only play through it, but play pretty up to his standard. And Tyler Lockett also has been pretty good as well. And we've seen that Seattle's just got a good mix of assortment of just guys, on offense and especially defense too. For the Bucs, I mentioned in the breakdown on Monday, but really they didn't have like a big explosive. I think their only 20+ yard play was in that last drive. It's just weird to factor in, it is Germany too. So the travel could affect these two teams, especially Seattle. That's the only reason I probably won't make this a lock at the end of the episode, is because a West Coast team going all the way to Germany. So their body clocks could be off and such. But I don't want to sit there and make that the reason why I don't pick against Seattle. Otherwise, I just feel like as a team, Seattle's had a good plan of attack every week. Defense isn't amazing, but they've always had a good sense of how to at least slow down the other team for most weeks. Some weeks they don't, and this could be easily one. But nonetheless, I'm going Seattle here, but not very confident, as I'm sure you are. But it is a tough game to pick. Funny though, because beginning of the season we all would have been like, oh, Bucks, boom, put it in, forget about it. But a little tougher as now that season's actually rolled out. So me and John with our first agreement there. Now we go to one of the premier games of the day, and this will be starting at noon now, and is the Buffalo Bills at Buffalo. They are favored by 5.5, hosting the Minnesota Vikings. Shane Kirk comes into town. Josh Allen, they said he's day-to-day with that elbow injury, so it's very possible he maybe not 100% and or not play this game. Who are you going with but for this matchup, John?
Another one I'm going to keep pretty simple. I'm going with Minnesota here. I obviously like the Bills far more than I do the Vikings, but with the Josh Allen stuff being questionable, I'm just going to play it safe and I'm going to roll the Vikings, because if Josh Allen's not 100% and he can't necessarily do everything that he normally does, they don't have a run game that they can really rely on to consistently go out there and win them a game. And so it's all on Josh. And so with the current injury and just things up in the air, even if he does play, I'm just not sure what the status is going to be. So I'm just playing it safe. I'm taking the Vikings to cover.
Yeah, I am also going with Minnesota. You know, the Bills had issues stopping the Jets' run game too last week. Their Bills defense, and I think Minnesota has a better run game. I would say probably has a better offensive line at this point than the Jets too. So I think that'll factor in, and I think, you know, probably better passing game too. Although it is at Buffalo, so, you know, maybe the home field advantage might play for Buffalo there. I'm not too concerned about Josh Allen's elbow. I mean, like you mentioned once last week in the breakdown, and everyone probably saw after he injured that elbow on that kind of strip sack kind of play. I think he said he threw the longest pass air yards wise.
It was like a 70-yard. It was that dot to Gabe Davis that he dropped. It was like a 70-yard like toss.
So I'm assuming he'll probably be okay. And if they're, regardless, I think Minnesota will keep it close. It's one of those games where I think we're really glad to have the spread. And if it is, however, it is Case Keenum, while he is serviceable, this Bills offense is just so dependent on Josh Allen making plays. I mean, he's their best rusher basically. And so if it's him, I would definitely hammer Minnesota. But regardless, I think they'll keep it close, like John as well. We are both going Vikings here to at least cover the spread against the Buffalo Bills. But now we head, speaking of the Vikings, going to my NFC North for a divisional matchup between the Chicago Bears. They are at home in the Windy City, favored by 3.5, hosting the Detroit Lions, fresh off that big win against my Packers. Who do you have between these two, John?
This game feels tough because Chicago's been hot, but it's all on the run game. And Detroit, their defense has been pretty bad, but then last week they get a pretty big win against Green Bay, which might have like revitalized their motivation and their belief this year. Also, you know, Amon-Ra St. Brown's getting more healthy. DeAndre Swift's getting more healthy. I don't know. I just don't know how to feel about this one. It's a divisional game. And so I'm taking Detroit just because in these divisional matchups, I just feel a little bit safer taking the underdog because these teams, they know each other. And I just don't know how to feel. I'm not, especially since I don't like, these two teams have kind of been irrelevant for, you know, most of my life. And so it feels hard to know like how they typically fare because I don't really pay attention to the NFC North like you might, for example. So I don't know like, oh, who has the upper hand over the last 10 years? Because realistically, in these divisional type of games, unless it's like super unbalanced, like Green Bay has been compared to the rest of the division for like the last decade, typically things can just be a lot closer than people expect. It's like a college rivalry where, you know, Ohio State, Michigan, it doesn't really matter how bad Michigan or Ohio State is any year. The game's going to be competitive for the most part, outside of like the random occasional year where it's not. So that's how I kind of feel about this one. So I just because I don't have a feel about it, I'm taking Detroit.
All righty. Well, another difference on the board here. I'm going Chicago. I think they've sort of found a formula to get Justin Fields going, although, you know, I think we all kind of saw what the formula was, but, you know, they found ways to incorporate that into their offense, you know, get him on a few more keepers and basically just, you know, loosen his leash a little bit, let him do what he does best, probably one of his best assets, which is run the ball. But we're seeing another week for Chase Claypool to get involved in the passing game. We saw him a little bit in there. And we've seen the passing game be a little bit better and better as time has gone on too. That's kind of been an understated thing. But yeah, mainly I'm picking against Detroit though. I like their O-line, but Jared Goff and inclement weather. I'm not sure what exactly the weather is, but it's November in Chicago. They call it the Windy City for a reason. This is I don't know if you remember, but when he was with the Rams back that year, where the Chicago was doing really well that first year, you know, this was like a statement win for Chicago. Granted, very different teams then, but yeah, I just think Goff is probably. I anticipate him struggling to throw the ball and and especially be aggressive downfield in this inclement weather. And, I think Chicago's got a little bit of confidence going. I know they lost against Miami last week, but, some pieces are kind of coming together. Granted, I'm still worried about their defense because their defense got torched last week. But like I said, I don't think Jared Goff will be able to take advantage like Tua and the Dolphins were. So I am going Chicago. I think they pull this one out, but knowing my luck, Dan Campbell and the gang are going to keep it within 3 or something. So we have a difference there in regards to that NFC North matchup. Now we head to what could potentially be a real stinker of a game, and that is between the Tennessee Titans. They are at home at Tennessee. They are favored by 3.5, hosting Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos. Broncos fresh off their bye. There's still I don't think I've seen any confirmation if it's going to be Ryan Tannehill this game, so it could very well be another Malik Willis game for the Tennessee Titans. Who are you rolling with here, John, between these two teams?
Just real quick before I talk about this game, I just saw on Twitter this guy tweeted at OBJ, "Don't reply to this if you're signing with the Browns." And he replied, "Hey, bro." So he's not signing with the Browns. And then another guy responded to that saying, "Hey, at OBJ, don't reply to this if you're signing with the Broncos." And he responded with a waving emoji. So confirmed, Odell Beckham is not signing with the Browns or the Broncos. So I needed to bring that up. For anyone thinking that maybe he might sign with them before this game, he will not. That being said, I'm going to take Denver here. Just with Malik Willis back there, there's almost no chance that their pass game really has any success, especially considering you're going against a Denver defense that features Pat Surtain, who's been one of the best corners in the entire NFL this year. Like, he's been locking down really good receivers, and they don't have really good receivers. So, there's not a lot going on in the pass game, and so it's just Derrick Henry, and Denver's defense is pretty good. And so I think that, although I expect Derrick Henry to have success, if they can limit him to even 150 yards and a touchdown, I think they can win that game, because then at that point, I think you're limiting Tennessee to, as long as you don't turn the ball over in really bad spots, that 150 yards, that equates to basically 2 long drives. And so, if your special teams and your offense can take care of the ball at the very least, I just don't think that Derrick Henry is going to be able to do enough damage against this Denver defense to where Russell Wilson, Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, all these guys off of a bye week can't outscore Malik Willis. Now, if Ryan Tannehill plays, that changes things a little bit. But even then, coming off injury, and Ryan Tannehill's not some world beater. I'm going with Denver. It just feels safer, despite how ugly their games have been. If it's an ugly game, typically the underdog's probably going to cover at the very least. So I'm going to go with Denver here.
Alrighty, well, I am also going with Denver. I'm basically in the same boat as you. Whether it's Malik Willis or Ryan Tannehill, we mentioned that the receiving core, passing game obviously isn't up to snuff for Tennessee as it has been in previous years. So even if Tannehill's playing, I expect this to be an ugly, run the ball defensive shootout for Tennessee and Denver as well. Be interested to see, Denver, obviously the health of Russell Wilson. And, if this Denver offense can get clicking like we've all expected it to, maybe the bye week they can finally got to iron some stuff out. We'll see. But regardless, like you mentioned, I think the Denver defense, like I said before, they've been the saving grace, kept them in all these games. And I think, they'll definitely scuff this game up, and it'll be definitely a game that a lot of people will probably be complaining about on Twitter and social media. Like, man, this game sucks. It's like, well, what'd you expect? Unless you're a Tennessee or Denver fan. I don't. Unless you're a Tennessee or Denver fan, I don't see any reason why to watch this game. I'm sure people will probably be placing prop bets and stuff too. But that will be a game I'll just watch the highlight or afterwards of, or maybe like for you watch the red zone. So that might pop into there if they even make it there. Who knows with these two offenses? But so John and I both going Denver to at least cover against the Titans. Now we go to Kansas City, where the Chiefs are at home. They are favored by 9.5, hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars, got that win to kind of snap that losing streak they were on. Obviously, Chiefs got win last on Sunday night against the Tennessee Titans. Who do you have between these two teams, John, and the Chiefs and Jaguars?
I'm going with Jacksonville. This might be really flawed logic, but I'm just thinking about when the Chiefs played the Raiders. That was a close game. The Jags just beat the Raiders, and so I think that maybe the Jags are going to be at least competitive enough to not get completely blown out in this one. I still think the Chiefs are going to win, but 9.5 point spread. They just had that against a Titans team that literally had 80 passing yards, and most of that came on like the first play of the game. So they couldn't cover in that one. I don't know. I just feel like Kansas City, they're just kind of figuring stuff out right now. I still expect them to win, like I said, but I think they got some flaws. And I think Jacksonville, especially with Travis Etienne playing really well, you can rely a lot more on him, don't have to force the issue, and can at least do enough to keep it close. So I am taking the Jags to cover. You're muted.
I am also going Jacksonville as well. The defense, like I mentioned before, they have talent on both sides of the ball. And I think they'll keep it relatively close for the Chiefs, between the Chiefs. And even then, like, it's one of those where 9.5 is a lot. I know Jacksonville, the record-wise hasn't been great, but I expect that they'll keep it close. They got a solid O-line. I think they'll pose some issues for the Chiefs' defense. End of day, though, Mahomes will make plays, and I expect the Chiefs to win. But I think Jacksonville will definitely keep it within 9 points here, as you obviously agree as well. So not much crazy analysis I have for this one. Also, it's a 9.5 point spread for a reason, because we're all expecting Kansas City to win. But hey, maybe could be one of those games, or Kansas City just drops one, kind of like they did against the Colts. Who knows? But highly unlikely, since they are at home. Anyways, now we move on to Miami, where the Dolphins, they're at home too. Surprisingly favored by only 3.5 against the Cleveland Browns. Also, although he's not playing this game, a little interesting because, remember Miami, they were really wanting Deshaun Watson. As much as they wanted to deny it, they were in those talks. Obviously, it didn't happen. Cleveland ends up with him. Nonetheless, he's not playing. Who do you have, though, John, between these two teams for this game?
I'm going to go with Cleveland. I think that maybe this spread is what it is because of what just happened against Chicago, where Chicago's run game was able to get a lot of yards. They were able to be very effective. Now, the one difference here is that Cleveland is using running backs as opposed to Chicago using a quarterback. And a running quarterback is just, the way that you have to scheme for that is so incredibly different from running backs, because it can be a pass play in which the quarterback takes off and gets a lot of those rushing yards. And then, the designed QB runs, which can just get a lot more creative than like a standard run can. But that being said, I still just have concerns about Miami's defense. I think that Cleveland has played well so far this year, despite not having, a lot of their key pieces. And I think that post-trade deadline, I'm hoping that maybe the relationship with Kareem Hunt is kind of clarified at this point, and they're both bought in to just do what they need to do for the rest of the season, because they weren't really using him like the first couple games before the trade deadline until that Bengals game, and then they used him. I'm hoping that we get a full dose of both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, because those guys are two incredibly talented backs, and so I'm taking Cleveland in this one. Also, I don't know. I feel like Myles Garrett, we haven't really heard his name recently. Has he been playing ever since that car crash? I assume he has, right? He has, actually, because I watched that Bengals game and he was playing. But we haven't really heard his name a ton since, that car crash happened. And it just feels like, with how great of a player he is, feels like he's due for a really big performance at some point. And that might be today against the Dolphins, who are going to get a lot of media attention and coverage because of, the guys that they have. So I don't know. I'm taking the Browns here to cover. I think that they could even probably win this game.
I think, this is a tough one to pick, but I have a lot of confidence in Miami's offense, especially we've seen that we mentioned Tyreek Hill as an MVP candidate. I mean, I don't foresee how the Browns are going to stop that passing attack. Like I mentioned before, very simplistic on the defensive side. They love to run a lot of zones. And I just feel like that just plays into Mike McDaniel's hands. He'll have a lot of answers to that, and just ways to get, as he's done all season, ways to get Tyreek and Jalen Waddle the ball in space, and just, basically make Cleveland tackle, which is tough, because it's tough to tackle those guys one-on-one. And two, Cleveland, their D-line, I mean, minus Myles Garrett, he's a freak, but their D-line as a whole, generally relatively smallish. So I think that even too, Miami will be able to probably get the run game going, something that they kind of got going a little bit last week with Jeff Wilson. I think they'll have a little more confidence and be able to do so this game as well, maybe, control the clock a little bit, give their defense some rest and time to adjust on the sideline. And yeah, with that too, I think Cleveland has what used to plague the Vikings in recent years, which is if you stop their run game, their passing offense isn't creative and dominant enough to hold up on its own. And I think that'll be Miami's plan of attack. Like you mentioned, it's a little bit different when you have to defend against a running quarterback and a running back. And I think that Miami will be able to key in, load the box, find ways to slow down Nick Chubb and maybe Kareem Hunt, and basically make Jacoby Brissett and Amari Cooper beat them. And if that's the case, I am going with the Dolphins. So I think that they will win and cover. John believes Cleveland will keep it close and or maybe win, regardless. They're the underdog. So another difference for us on the books there. Now we go to New York, where the New York Giants, they are at home, favored by 6.5, hosting the Houston Texans. Excuse me. Not much. This is another game that's probably not going to be very exciting unless you're a fan of one of these teams. Even so, probably still won't be exciting for you. John, you going with your division rivals here, or are you going with the Houston Texans? And you're muted.
I'm going with the Giants in this one. Saquon Barkley, he's the guy. And Houston, their run defense has been really poor. So I'm going with Saquon basically to just dominate that Houston defense. Plus, Dameon Pierce just got added to the injury report due to like a shoulder and chest issue. I still think he's probably going to play because I haven't heard that it was anything crazy serious, but just something to keep note of because really this Houston offense kind of goes as Dameon Pierce goes. So I don't know, that combined with the fact that their defense is just so bad that they're going to play exactly into what the Giants are going to want to do. I think it's a really big day for Saquon, and I think the Giants win and cover at home off the bye week.
All right. Well, another difference here. I am going with Houston. I think the Giants will win, but if you look at most of their games, I mean, it's been close-ish kind of affairs. Their offense they haven't really been blowing people out. And Houston, like we saw against the Eagles, like they got some good pieces, but obviously, they just don't have enough to win, especially against the better teams in the NFL. I'm mainly just of the belief that the Giants will win, but Houston will be annoyingly close and or maybe get a garbage time, score. A little worried. Dameon Pierce did pop up on the injury report today, and he has been, especially with no Brandon Cooks, if he even plays this game, which he probably won't, he's been their main difference maker and probably sole difference maker on offense without Brandon Cooks. So that does scare me. But like I said, Giants, they just really haven't been blowing teams out. They just, find ways to win, ugly or mainly ugly, not really pretty. So I'm going with Houston to keep it close, but I think the Giants will win. So I am threading the needle there. John believes the Giants will cover that spread and obviously win. Now we go to see the New Orleans Saints. They are favored by 3.5 going to Pittsburgh. Saints obviously lost on Monday night, and Pittsburgh coming off a bye week. John, do you think that the bye week will be enough to push Pittsburgh past these New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, I actually think it will be. The Saints have just been so up and down recently. They destroy the Raiders, but we're kind of seeing even more and more that the Raiders are just not a very good football team. But then they come out flat against Baltimore. They did not have the greatest performances in primetime against Arizona. I don't know. They just feel really up and down for me to where Pittsburgh, I feel like this could be like a breakout game for George Pickens. I don't want to overhype him because I've been really high on him ever since he was in college, but Chase Claypool's gone. They've talked about trying to get George Pickens more involved. I think he could have potentially a really big game here against New Orleans secondary that's still struggling with injuries. And for New Orleans, I just think there's some quarterback question marks. Also, might be a TJ Watt sighting this week. Apparently, he might be coming back from the injury report. And I think if that happens, he could be giving whoever's playing quarterback for the Saints a lot of issues. So I don't know. I just feel like Pittsburgh is a pretty decent underdog right now that they're at home, especially if TJ Watt comes back. I think this line could move. So I just feel like I'm getting pretty decent value right now. And plus, New Orleans just kind of burned me recently. Like I picked them this past week against Baltimore. They did not cover. I think I might have picked them the week prior. No, I didn't. But they covered that one when we picked the Raiders. So like I don't have a feel for New Orleans, and that makes me a little nervous for this one. But I'm going with Pittsburgh.
Even if TJ Watt does play, who knows if he'll be 100%. I am going with the New Orleans Saints. I mentioned before, I just have very little confidence in the Pittsburgh offense. I think New Orleans does match up pretty solidly, their defense with Pittsburgh. And obviously, they're not facing Lamar Jackson. I mentioned last week they've had issues against very mobile dual threat quarterbacks. Kenny Pickett can run, but that's not a staple of their offense. Is him taking it on the read option. We mentioned that Najee Harris, the run game have not got going. I don't foresee that happening this week either. Saints do have, although for the most part, in regards to non-dual threat games, have a solid run defense. So, yeah, I just not very confident in Pittsburgh passing game to get them over the hump here. While New Orleans, although it is against Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is very good at mucking things up. I think New Orleans will find ways to move the ball. Hopefully they get Jarvis Landry back just to have another viable weapon in the offense. Regardless, combination of Kamara, Taysom Hill, and obviously Chris Olave, I think will be enough for New Orleans to win this one. And also I'm just kind of expecting a Kenny Pickett, or even if Trubisky comes in, I'm expecting some sort of tragic turnover to lead to points that will ultimately be the decision, the decisive mistake. So I am going New Orleans to cover. John is going with Pittsburgh to at least cover and or win. So we'll see if Pittsburgh can hold on at home. But now, speaking of being at home, we go to the Las Vegas Raiders, who are probably glad they're at home, as they are favored by 6.5, hosting the Indianapolis Colts. These two teams have not lived up to expectations, to say the least, that we all set before the season. This is Jeff Saturday's debut. How do you think it goes, John?
I'm not picking Jeff Saturday's debut. I saw these people were posting these tweets from Saturday earlier in the season, maybe even like a couple weeks ago, that he was complaining about Devontae Adams' fantasy stat line. It apparently at some point during a game in which Devontae already had fantasy points, it showed him as having 0 and 0, and he complained about that openly on Twitter. So everybody was memeing that wouldn't it be awfully convenient if Jeff Saturday, just happened to put Devontae in a lot of single coverage with no safety help this week? Because obviously it seems like he has him on his fantasy team. I don't think that's going to happen. But that being said, I'm just not taking Jeff Saturday in his debut, considering that this Colts team is they don't have anybody who's called plays on that offense. And so entirely new play caller, poor Sam Ellinger, obviously I didn't think the guy was ready to start anyway, but you get thrown into this season. Your offensive line's been poor. Jonathan Taylor's not playing. And now you've had a new offensive play caller every single game, because his first career game, he had whoever their OC was. That guy gets fired. So then Reich takes over play calling last week. Then he gets fired. So now you got a new, 3 weeks in, you got a new play caller. You got no chemistry with anybody. It's not going to happen against a Raiders team that, yeah, they've been disappointing, but I just don't think that this is a lead that even they can choke.
Yeah, I'm going with the Raiders too at home. I think we'll fuel them. I think I saw they're technically 2-1 at home or something, and then winless on the road. So it's obvious they're a little bit better at home. And I think that one loss was that tragic one against the Cardinals, where they just fell apart. But yeah, I expect they'll probably know that the stigma's around, that they can't hold on to a lead. And I'm sure that they'll probably answer back today, especially on the offensive side of the ball, on Sunday. And yeah, I kind of like how you already said, I have just no concept or no feel for what to expect out of the Colts. I mean, Jonathan Taylor still is questionable. It's not like I can say, okay, they'll just lean on the run game, because I will say, Raiders defense, like we mentioned, lack of difference makers can't be probably had if Jonathan Taylor's healthy. And but end of the day, I hate to put it on the quarterbacks, but I just obviously trust Derek Carr more than Sam Ellinger. And once again, although they've been under fire, trust Josh McDaniels and that coaching staff. I know what to expect, as opposed to Jeff Saturday and what he's going to bring to the table. So yes, kind of broke that disagreement streak, but we are both going with the Raiders here to cover and win at home to take care of business. So we'll see, because Raiders have burned me. You mentioned the Saints. The Raiders are a team that I have not been able to get a feel for. 1 week, the week I'm off them is when Josh Jacobs has comes back to life, and then the next week they blow a lead when I'm on them. So we'll see if we can get the right feel for them this week. But now, John, we go to our game, the game that they've been trying. They hyped up last week. They had the little promo. Dallas, they are favored. Your Dallas Cowboys, they are favored by 5.5 going to Green Bay. So Mike McCarthy, he's coming back to Green Bay, and we have this rivalry because, apparently we beat you on the playoffs or whatever. Anyways, I'll throw it to you first. How do you expect our little showdown to go?
There is no logic to my pick here, but this isn't even the pod curse. I'm taking Green Bay because I've had too many times in my freaking life that I've felt so confident going up against the Packers and we lose. Like you said, they're hyping it up because of a rivalry. And honestly, I don't really think it's been a rivalry because, for most of my life, the Packers have beaten the Cowboys. I mentioned this to you and our friend Matt, who's also a Packers fan, that the two worst Cowboys losses of my adult life were against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. It was the Dez caught it situation, and then the one where Rodgers throws that absolute dime to Jared Cook 40 yards downfield on the sideline. Those two games are the most heartbreaking of playoff losses that I've had in my life. And I will say, this Packers team is not even close to those Packers teams, but I'm still just not picking against the Packers because I've seen the Cowboys, even in other games, not including those two playoff games, be the favorites and not be able to do it. And I don't know, Mike McCarthy going back to his old stomping grounds. I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm taking Green Bay here because I don't want this to be the week where I'm yes, Dallas is totally going to do it. And then they just get crushed and everybody's oh, Green Bay's back. I just don't want to be a part of that.
I mentioned last podcast, I've been off. I've officially not really been off, but I try to be objective with my Packers. I think that's one of my few genuine qualities, and I'll just say this: I'm going with Dallas here. Nothing inspires me, and I feel like I say this every week. There's just no confidence for me. Nothing for us to build on. At least in previous years, he had Devontae, Aaron Jones. I will say, he's gotten the better of y'all, but that's been in Dallas as opposed to in Green Bay. And like I mentioned too, our defensive line isn't as great, and Dallas's defense pretty good. And I just feel like Micah Parsons is going to get real familiar with Aaron Rodgers, and not in the way that Rodgers wants to. And on the flip side, Dallas has got good balance. Green Bay defense has been solid, but losing Rashawn Gary is a hard, tough loss because our best that means our pass rushers are probably going to be Preston Smith and Enigbari, who's a 4th or 5th round rookie, if I remember correctly. He's been solid, but obviously a huge step down from Rashawn Gary, and obviously losing that depth sucks because I don't even know who our third pass rusher behind him is. So. I just have no confidence in my Packers on either side of the ball. While Dallas, they've got their formula going, and y'all are coming off a bye week too. And I'm sure Mike McCarthy's definitely. You can probably say, oh, it's nothing personal with business, but he's probably definitely a little bitter about basically getting kicked out towards the end. And especially he's probably happy to see that this turmoil is going on. He'll probably be definitely happy to add on top of it another loss. And that's what I'm expecting. So I am going with Dallas. I think that they will obviously cover and win against my Packers at Lambeau. I expect to be right back here Tuesday next week. Moreau's sad, but I'm not going to be shocked. What about? So, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I just want to add that, I know that some people try to say that when there's these, revenge games for coaches and stuff, that, teams try to just, not take it seriously. The Cowboys take it seriously. Last year when Dan Quinn, or maybe it was 2 years ago, I can't remember. I think last year was Dan Quinn's first year. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Whenever they first played maybe it was I can't remember when they hired him. Anyway, whenever they first played the Falcons, because obviously the Cowboys are his first team post, being fired by the Falcons, that was a big deal. And I remember it was very emotional. They came out, they crushed the Falcons in that game. Like, it wasn't even close. And they gave Dan Quinn the game ball, and like everybody was super hyped and excited for him. And he was talking about how he was excited for it. And so just at least under Mike McCarthy so far, like that's been something that they have paid attention to. And I got to imagine that whether McCarthy admits it or not, he probably really wants to win this game pretty badly. So we'll see. I'm still going with the Packers, but the Cowboys, they do care about that kind of stuff.
Oh, and then also, like, the players might be like, hey, we're going to win this one for Mike. You know what I mean? They might be a little more motivated, too.
I mean, Micah Parsons has already said that. He said that about the Dan Quinn one. He was like, we're going to go out there and we're going to win it for Dan. And so I almost guarantee that some of the players in there are going to say it, same thing.
So, yeah, so we have a difference there in the game between both of our favorite teams. So we'll see how that one ends up. Now we head to the last afternoon game, and that is between the LA Rams. It is at LA. They are favored by 3.5, hosting the Arizona Cardinals. Once again, two teams we all had higher expectations for, and they have not lived up to them. So who do you think escapes this one with the win, John? Or I guess covers, sorry.
This one was really hard for me because I don't like Cliff, but the Rams are struggling. I went with the Rams. I'm gonna say this now because this might change, and I want to be prepared ahead of time. Matthew Stafford got put into concussion protocol today, and if he is ruled out, I am changing my pick to the Cardinals. Just throwing that out there right now, because if he doesn't play, there's literally no hope for them. But assuming Matthew Stafford does play, and I assume he probably will, I'm going with the Rams. I don't feel great about it, but I don't know. This is just one of those ones where I just kind of flipped a coin in my mind and said, whatever, and just picked one because I don't like what I'm seeing out of either team, to be honest.
Yeah, this was not a fun one to pick. I went with the Cardinals really because it was kind of the mindset of like, well, even if the Cardinals lose, I feel like it will be close. I just feel like it will be a close game nonetheless. And especially if Matthew Stafford doesn't play, the Cardinals defense, like I kind of mentioned with Denver, they've done their job. They've kind of, they've created turnovers. Heck, they've even started, generated those turnovers into points. And although the offense has been pretty, Kyler's still a playmaker, and we've seen still that him and D-Hop still have a solid connection, and Ertz has been solid as well. It's like a very small amount. I want to know. It's a very small amount of confidence. I just have a little bit more confidence right now in the Arizona offense than I do the LA Rams. Like you mentioned, especially if no Matthew Stafford. But regardless, Rams aren't going to be able to run the ball, and I think that plays in Arizona's defense's hands because they're going to be like, okay, we can do a lot more, expect the pass and do a lot more creative things to take away Cooper Kupp and force some mistakes and such. So I'm going Arizona, but like you, this was the tough game to pick. But regardless, for me, whether Stafford plays or not, I'm going Arizona. Obviously, John's stipulation. If Matthew Stafford is ruled out, obviously we will change his pick to Arizona. So, but he's going with the Rams in the meantime. So that is another difference for us. Yeah, another one. We got quite a few, so you could easily all shifts your way. You could be right back in the mix of things after this week. But anyways, let's go to the Sunday night game. West Coast battle between the San Francisco 49ers. They are at home, fresh off the bye week. Their bye week, favored by 7.5, hosting the LA Chargers. I believe, obviously, no Mike Williams, probably no Keenan Allen for this game also. I don't know. I'm asking you because, for those who don't know, John has Keenan Allen in our Dynasty League.
Mike Williams already ruled out. He's still on IR. And Keenan Allen, he's day to day. They've literally said that for the last month. So I still don't know. I still don't know.
So probably assume no. But anyways, who do you have for this game?
I'm going with the Niners. They're at home. They got a lot going for them. They're off a bye week. So I think at this point we're going to see a fully unleashed Christian McCaffrey, and the Chargers can't stop the run. So I don't know. Also, once again, I don't know who's going to play receiver. I just don't know. Mike Williams is already ruled out for sure. But Keenan Allen, they just keep saying day to day. They keep saying, oh, he's practicing a little bit here and there, and he gets ruled out. And I just don't think that when you're going against Nick Bosa and Fred Warner and some of the guys they have on that defense, that having Josh Palmer and Gerald Everett is going to cut it. And like Justin Herbert's already playing through injury. The offensive line's banged up. This just feels like it could potentially turn into a blowout, because I just don't think the Chargers are going to be able to keep up by doing the dink and dunks to Austin Eckler and the occasional like random deep bomb to Gerald Everett that doesn't pan out.
Yeah, I want to start there. I'm going with San Francisco. In regards to the Chargers, I just, like you said, I don't think they're going to be able to nickel and dime their way up the field against, pretty good defense, and especially against this defense. And then on the flip side, just once again, just another poor matchup. Like, this is not what the Chargers wanted with their struggles defending the run. Is, let's play Kyle Shanahan fresh off a bye with his new toy, Christian McCaffrey. That's just a bad recipe for the Chargers. But for the Niners, this is just a perfect storm. We mentioned, probably it's looking like they have a chance to make another one of those second half runs that they've been doing the past few years. This is a prime jump off point for that. I'm going with the Niners to win and cover also. So likely we have another kind of boring blowout Sunday night game. Fortunately, some of these primetime games are just not panned out at all. The NFL must not be, or the ESPN and NBC probably want their money back, and Amazon. But anyways, now we go to the Monday night game. Last but not least, it's a division battle in your division, John, between the Philadelphia Eagles. It's at Philly. They are favored by 10.5, hosting the Washington Commanders. Commanders had that close game against the Vikings, before she couldn't finish that one out. Do you think Washington can keep this one close, John, or do you think Philly wins this?
I don't know how to feel about this one. Washington has been steadily improving. Yes, they are below 500, but they looked really good against the Vikings last week. It's a big spread. The Eagles didn't really impress me against Houston. So ultimately, I think I'm going to take the Commanders here to cover. I don't think they win. I still think Philadelphia is going to, roll to a victory. But a backdoor cover doesn't feel out of the picture. Taylor Heineke, he gets this team fired up. I don't know. I could see them losing by 10, and that's enough for Washington to cover. So I'm taking Washington. Also, I don't know. I feel like Philadelphia has kind of entered this territory because like the rest of the schedule is really easy, that everyone's kind of just naturally assuming that they might potentially even go undefeated outside of like maybe the Cowboys game or, one of those other games later down the road. So I think some of these opponents might be kind of getting overlooked, and at some point, like, it's just going to happen. It's the NFL. Any given Sunday, anybody can win. I still think that Philadelphia is one of the best teams in the NFL, but at some point, you're going to get a situation like the Jets last week beating the Bills, and it just didn't seem like it was probable, and then it happens. And so, I don't know. This could be that game just because it's a divisional game. And like I said, divisional games, they're just a little different. So I'm taking Washington. I don't think they win, but I would say compared to like other teams that are 10.5 point dogs in those divisional games, despite how big that spread is, it seems like there's way more likelihood of a chance that underdog could potentially win just because of how familiar they are with each other. So I'm at least taking them to cover. And like I said, I don't think they'll win, but I think they can keep it relatively close.
I am going with Philly. I feel like, especially for Washington, this could be one of those losses, or this could be a week where, because they lost a close one last week, it kind of avalanches into another one here. And I think Philly too, especially with the extra 3 days, I'm sure that they'll have plenty of creative ways to move the ball on top of what they already do. And I don't think Washington's offensive line and run game is good enough to take advantage of the loss of Jordan Davis, unlike Houston was able to. And like I mentioned last week, I mean, technically too, one of those touchdowns was kind of lucky by Taylor Heineke in the game. Like, the ref was literally, basically a free screen for them. So Yeah, and I just Taylor Heineke's had gone away with a few, drop interceptions, poor mistakes, and Philadelphia's been really good about capitalizing on mistakes and opportunities on defense. Darius Slay and Bradbury have had a late resurgence in their careers. I think they both kind of had a good bounce back on top of their, and on top of the fact that it's another week that why am I blanking on the edge rusher they just traded for?
Robert Quinn.
Robert Quinn, thank you. It was Robert. I had Robert in my head, but I don't know. Yeah, another week for Robert Quinn to get associated with this team, with the Eagles defense, and more antiquated with it. And I'm sure he'll be wreaking havoc along with Hassan Reddick and such. And yeah, I'm just not confident in Washington's O line against the Philly D line, especially in passing situations. So I think Philly wins and covers. John is at least hoping for a cover, and could very well happen because 10.5 is a lot. So that is 8 differences. So yeah, I mean, he probably won't do it all in one fell swoop, but John could very well make a comeback this week. We will have to see. So those are our picks against the spread for the week. Now, John, this has been a tough one for us. Only one of us has actually made it through with gotten all our locks right. Last week was terrible for me. I think both my locks were bad, or not bad, but I went over 2 last week. You didn't have a great week either. I think you went first last week, right? For our locks. So I got to go first.
Yep.
All right. Well, not a lot. I feel confident. This is a tough week. I'm going to go with Dallas. This is how little confidence I have in my Packers. I am going with Dallas. I think that they cover and win. Like I said, I have zero confidence in my Packers to pull off an upset here. Like I said, I just don't see how. Like, usually there's some sort of factor like, okay, they may have the advantage here. I just really don't see where Green Bay has an advantage over Dallas in this game. So I'm going with Dallas as my first lock. What about you?
I am going to take the 49ers against the Chargers.
That's a good one. Probably should have taken that one. I don't know why I oversaw that one.
That run defense against McCaffrey off a bye week, it scares me.
Man, none of these other ones I feel great about. I'm going to go with this will be my last one. I'm going with Miami. I just got to get, like I said, they're kind of rolling. They're rolling with some confidence. Tua's out here, or Tua's playing Fortnite with Tyreek and such. So, I don't know. They're kind of gelling right now.
This might burn me, but I'm taking the Raiders. I did it last week.
I thought about it, but I was like, I do not trust either of those teams. It's one of those things where I'm trying to stick with what I know, known commodities, and I was like, that thought popped in my mind too. It's very juicy and tempting to go against Jeff Saturday. So I hear it, I understand it, but I got scared because
actually I didn't lock him last week. I picked him last week and I was wrong. I locked him 2 weeks ago when they got 24-0
when they got skunked
against the Saints. So if they get shut out again, then the football gods or somebody needs to call me about these Raiders games, because I can almost guarantee that they get skunked if that happens. But I'm taking the Raiders there. All right. You said you're not taking another one.
There's no. This is a kind of a tough week. So yeah, there's no one else I'm really feeling confident in to take right now. A lot of interesting matchups as always, but yeah.
I am gonna take one more.
Okay.
And it is going to be Seattle against Tampa. I feel confident.
Obviously, I picked Seattle too. I don't know why my lights just went out. I picked Seattle too. So obviously, I'm hoping you're right. But only reason I didn't pick them too is, like I said, that the whole time difference sometimes is a real thing. Although, and I expect them, obviously, that they're probably trying to prepare for it. But it's always different, when you're actually in the real game and.
Right.
Maybe the body clocks may not be right. So, all right. So John's got 3. His locks are Seattle. They are the underdog by 2.5. Not the Rams. Las Vegas Raiders. They are favored by 6.5. So they got to win by 7+. And then the Niners. They are favored by 7.5. So they got to win by 8+. And all 3 need a hit, technically, for them to count. If one doesn't, unfortunately, John loses the rest. For me, I went with Miami, for them to beat Cleveland by 4 or more points. And then I'm going to pick, I never thought I'd utter these words, but it happens when you want to be objective and you want to be right. I'm picking Dallas to beat my Packers by 6 or more points. Yeah, that was a little hurt. That hurt me a little bit. Anyways, Those are our picks and locks against the spread for week 10. Obviously, we'll be back next week to react to our picks, the results of the games. Otherwise, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I'll do it one more time. Please feel free to like, comment, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Our YouTube page is Shut Up and Ball, and we obviously are on all podcast streaming platforms. Shut Up and Ball there. You can feel free to listen, cut through, whatever, and please feel free to rate and review us. However, whatever reviewing system is where you're listening from. So, otherwise, everyone enjoy your weekend, and we will see you all next week. Adios.